So hello class, welcome to part 2 of this art PowerPoint. Again, I sort of want to just go 15 minutes at a time. Not sure if I'm going to be able to finish, but let's get started. So last time, if I could go back real quick, we talked about Greece. We have the archaic and the classical period. So moving on, we're talking about Greek, Roman, and again we're doing the fundamentals of art. So after this early classical period, we talked about contrapposto, or these real-life sculpting figures. I'm going to move on to the middle classical period, and this one marked an exclamation point, architectural breakthroughs. So this is where we get the true Greek architecture that you guys are familiar with. So they reconstructed the Parthenon, which some of you may know. We have these gorgeous columns and post and lintel construction. The late classical period, Athens actually lost the Peloponnesian War, so a lot of the art innovations slowed down in this era. They used more Corinthian columns. And then the Hellenistic period, the art of Greece and Asia Minor sort of fused together. So we have two freestanding sculptures in this period. They have the Venus de Milo, and the Laocoon group. I have two, and some of you need to write this down because I know it's not written on here, but this middle classical period over here, this was 448 to 400 BCE. This late classical period is 400 to 323 BCE, and Hellenistic, this is from 331 to 23 BCE. So a couple of things some of you may be confused from the last slide. You see it says Corinthian columns. We talked about Ionic columns and Doric columns, so maybe you could put this in your quiz about vocabulary. A Doric column is very simple. There's no top ornament. Or there's no base at the bottom. So it's a simple column that's called Doric. Ionic, it has a scroll design at the top. So it's like, think of a regular column. If it has a scroll design on the top, they call that Ionic. And then Corinthian, they have a design of a plant or some sort of design, a floral plant design at the top. So it can either be plain, which is called Doric. It could have a scroll design at the top, which is called Ionic. And then Corinthian is they have a design of a plant at the top. So hopefully you know the three different columns. I'd like to talk to you about what these are. This is the Venus de Milo. It was actually in the Simpsons episode once. I don't know if you guys have seen that. And then this one is the Laocoon group. So the two freestanding sculptures that we mentioned down here, these are the two pictures of those sculptures. Etruscan and Roman art, so moving on from Greece, so I talked to you about all the eras of Greek art. Etruscan is the transition, it's the era between Greek and Roman. So this is in the first millennium BCE, so Etruscan, first millennium BCE. All you need to know, I mean, there's nothing much written here, but they were known for temples and bronze, clay, cheerful tomb decorations. That's Etruscan. It didn't survive, it didn't last as long. We never talk about it because it was actually built from brick and wood, so we never really talk about Etruscan art. So moving on to the next famous one is Roman art. Roman art followed Etruscan styles, but later it copied Greek sculpture. So in terms of architecture and engineering, we have the discovery of concrete. You guys know what concrete is. So now we got domes, aqueducts. Aqueducts are structures that transfer water, and bathhouses. They're like swimming pools almost. Other innovations in the Roman art, we got the arch, bridges, paved roads, the Colosseum, and the Pantheon. So all these famous things about Rome. I'll start with this discovery of concrete. They also produced many sculptures, so I know this might get cut off in the video, but they stood on triumphal arches to honor rulers, and then they used these portrait heads to memorialize deceased, honored statesmen, nobles, things like that. On the top right, some of you may be wondering, this is a Roman portrait head that we were talking about when they dedicate or memorialize the deceased. From there, we have the Byzantine and medieval art. Byzantium, they're mostly in churches in Italy. The best known Byzantine art are mosaics of glass tiles. If you know what mosaics are, they're like little tiles that make up a picture. Byzantium also constructed the Hagia Sophia. It's one of the greatest architectural feats. It's an awesome building, Hagia Sophia, and it was built in Constantinople, which some of you may know is Istanbul or Turkey. In the early medieval period, we're talking about, again, none of this is written down, but 375 to 1000 BCE. We have the Catholic Church being the driving force of where the art is coming from, especially illuminated manuscripts. And then nomadic Germanic peoples, they were crafted metalwork and woodwork. And in the late medieval period, we're talking about Romanesque, based on the Roman arch. So barrel vaults, massive walls, small windows, doors, relief sculpture. Those are Romanesque in the late medieval period. And then Gothic, we're talking about ribbed vaults, pointed arches, high ceilings, thin walls, large windows. So you may have heard this term, the flying buttresses, like this sort of like arches. And then stained glasses, Gothic, late medieval period. That's where this came from. So some of these things that I'm showing you, this is the Hagia Sophia I was telling you about. This right here is a page from the book of Kells, which is, as I talked about, these illuminated manuscripts for Catholicism. This is a page from it. And this right here is a stained glass window, so this is obviously representative of the Gothic style in the late medieval period. Here's some of the early artists. So again, there's a lot of things that, there's a lot of different people you're going to have to know and memorize. I don't know how we'll practice in class. But two factors, you might want to write this down because it's not on here, but two factors really made this Renaissance take off. One of them is the invention of paper money. So now when we had literal hand paper money that could be easily distributed, the accumulation of wealth made a small group of nobles, a small group of rich people be able to buy art and pay people and motivate people to actually do a lot of this art. So that's why they call it the Renaissance. And second, they discovered in this Italian Renaissance some Greek and Roman sculptures, and all of a sudden we have this motivation and this inspiration for them to draw and create some of the greatest art pieces in this Italian Renaissance. So here's some here's some five artists. The first one is Giotto de Bordone. He was a transition from medieval art and Renaissance, so he's like in this middle space, and he applied what they call simple perspective. So in perspective, things in the front are big and the things far away are small. Lorenzo Ghiberti, he designed the two doors of the Florence Baptistery. So we're talking about so Lorenzo Ghiberti, he designed these two doors of the Florence Baptistery. Filippo Brunelleschi, he finished the dome of the cathedral in Florence, and he developed a linear perspective. Donatello, sounds like one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, if you guys watch that. He is literally considered the father or the founder of modern sculpture, and he constructed the David, and some of you may know this art piece. And the last one, Botticelli, he scandalized viewers, essentially shocked people with the birth of Venus. Some of you may have seen this, and it's a pretty famous portrait. There's some couple of things that you want to write down about these that might help you understand these. When we talk about simple perspective for de Bordone, he used essentially overlapping figures to create perspective. Lorenzo Ghiberti, if you want to write this down, the reason why he got to design the doors is he won a competition. Who wants to design the door? And he won. And he also was commissioned to create another set of doors. And he was so great, and some of you know who Michelangelo is. He said his set of doors are the most magnificent, and he called them the gates of paradise. Brunelleschi, he created illusion of depth by making vertical lines converge. So it's hard for me to show you. I can show you in class, but you may have seen like a road where you start with two lines like in the front, and then they diverge in the middle, so it looks like you're walking down this long road. That's how he created linear perspective. Donatello, we talked about. He was the first known freestanding nude sculptures. Talking about the David, and then the birth of Venus, the ideal of female beauty. It was also the first full-length nude since classical time. So let me show you what these are. This one right here is this one here at the top is the gates of paradise that we were talking about. Oh, sorry. This is an example of simple perspective. So Bordone or Giotto, just people overlapping people, so you get this perspective. That's called simple perspective. This right here is the gates of paradise. So beautiful if you guys like art. This is Donatello's David. So this is what we're talking about, these freestanding nude sculptures. Yay. And here's the birth of Venus. Some of you may have seen this sculpture before, or this painting before, or something very similar. Moving on to high Renaissance art, and these are the more famous Italian artists, and also the other names of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We got Leonardo da Vinci, Mona Lisa, The Last Supper. Sfumato, the vocab word that you might need to know for that quiz. You essentially blur outlines of figures to create like smoke. Um, we have Michelangelo, who sculpted again David. This is the famous David. This is out of marble. Some of you may have seen this before. It's here in the top right. He painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which some of you may know. Raphael, he painted frescoes for Pope Julius II. Um, he also was famous for his images of the Virgin Mary. Giorgione, he was the first landscape painter, so he created paintings with landscapes. Vicelli, or Titian Vicelli, he's the greatest colorist. He put backgrounds in portraits. And then Tintoretto, he was the forerunner of what they call Mannerism. Mannerism is, gosh, if you're not really into art, it's hard to explain, but warped perspective, toxic colors, subjects in twisted poses, distorted scale, so a non-linear, more abstractly type art. So 6 more artists, maybe you know 2 of them already. That's what this slide's about. Moving on to Northern Renaissance art. So just to backtrack real quick, we've got early Italian Renaissance. We just talked about High Renaissance, and now this one we're talking about Northern Renaissance. The difference is from Italy, it's smaller, more realistic, more detailed. So a little bit different than the ones we just talked about. The reason how they achieved that, they used these new oil paints that were more realistic. Then they were not influenced by classics, so they were more. The previous ones are influenced again by Greek and Roman. The connections to Italy, remember artists and merchants, they started to travel now. So between the regions, they connected to some Italian influence. So engravings, the famous artwork circulated. 3 of them that you want to know about from the Northern Renaissance art period. We got Matthias Grunwald. He created the Eisenheim altarpiece. Albrecht Dürer, he traveled to Italy and brought Italian ideas back to the north. And he created the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And lastly, Hans Holbein the Younger created portraits displaying the sitter's personality. So a couple of things that maybe you want to notice that is not written on there. This right here is the Eisenheim altarpiece by Grunwald. Okay, and this one, it's hard to see. I know it's small, but this is the image of the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse by Albrecht Dürer. Italian Baroque art. So we're talking about this era is marked by the consolidation of power and reigning sovereigns. So whoever the conqueror or whoever the king or the reigning leader was, that's where most of the art was influenced. So compared to the Renaissance, we're talking about more movements, energy, emotions, a little bit different. We got rich color, ornamentation, dramatic theater, theatrical lighting effects. The 3 from this era, we got to talk about Caravaggio. He had this shocking naturalism, Caravesque, extreme lights, extreme darks. That's how he gets this shocking realism. Artemisia Gentileschi, he painted self-portraits, and then his focus, his theme was Old Testament women. And then Gian Lorenzo Bernini, the most important one. So if you remember any of these, remember Bernini. He was a sculptor, architect, painter, designed theater, and he sculpted the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. Here on the top, we've got, this is an example of Caravaggio's naturalism, and you got here, it looks like almost like a portrait. And then here on the bottom, this is the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. This is in the Cornaro Chapel, and he had a stained glass window, which is not here, but this sculpture was an unprecedented use of marble, and he sculpted this drapery and even clouds, and that's how amazing his art was.